It takes an almost unbelievable amount of bad luck and oversight to ruin a meticulously planned $25,000 contract murder. But in this case, the entire elite conspiracy didn't fall apart because of a hero cop or a surprise witness. It all started to crumble because one person, just an average junkie with bad intent, did a casual Google search for a single street name. That one simple search unlocked a digital footprint that pointed investigators to a secret double life, a mountain of corporate evidence, and a trail that led directly from a low-rent motel right into the middle of one of Charleston's most powerful, multi-million-dollar families. Wait until you see how this tiny oversight exposed everything. Just a quick heads up before the story begins. Every single name, location, and piece of evidence you're about to hear is completely real, taken directly from public federal court transcripts and official police records. None of the details have been fictionalized or altered for drama. Because of the serious nature of these real-world events, viewer discretion is advised as we walk through the exact steps of the case. The city of Charleston, South Carolina, is known for its historic charm, quiet coastal streets, and tightly knit, wealthy communities where everyone seems to know everyone else's business. In early April of 2013, the surface of this peaceful community was completely shattered by what seemed like a minor, routine event. On a warm spring afternoon, local patrol officers spotted a vehicle moving through the city traffic and decided to pull it over for a standard traffic violation. The driver of the car was a man named Aaron Wilkinson, who had traveled all the way from Kentucky. When the officers approached the vehicle and began a standard search, the routine stop instantly transformed into a high-stakes scenario. Inside the car, officers discovered a loaded firearm and a significant amount of ammunition. Carrying these items across state lines immediately raised red flags, and Wilkinson was taken into custody for questioning. Facing serious federal weapons charges that could put him behind bars for a very long time, Wilkinson made a sudden decision to protect himself. He looked at the investigators and told them that if they thought the gun was bad, they had no idea what he was actually doing in Charleston. He stated that he hadn't traveled across state lines to commit a random robbery. He was there to fulfill a contract execution. Wilkinson laid out an unbelievable story to the local police, which caused them to immediately contact the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He explained that he was working with a former prison cellmate named Samuel Yenowine. According to Wilkinson, Yenowine had approached him with an opportunity to make quick money. Yenowine told him that a wealthy, anonymous client wanted a specific target eliminated. The target was a woman living in an affluent area of Charleston named Nancy Latham. At the time, Nancy was a well-known local figure who served as the treasurer for the South Carolina State Lottery Commission. Wilkinson told the agents that he and Yenowine had packed their bags, rented a vehicle in Kentucky, and driven straight down to South Carolina with the sole intention of tracking Nancy's daily movements and executing her. To prove he wasn't making the story up to escape a weapons charge, Wilkinson told federal agents exactly how the operation was being managed. He explained that the entire plot was being coordinated through a series of secret meetings and untraceable communications, and that they had been given a physical package containing everything needed to complete the job. The FBI immediately moved Nancy Latham and her children into protective custody, hiding them away in safe houses under constant guard. For Nancy, the news was a psychological nightmare. She was told that two armed men from out of state had been lurking near her home, watching her daily routines, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. While Nancy and her family lived in hiding, looking over their shoulders in absolute terror, a massive multi-agency task force consisting of the FBI, local police, and federal firearms agents began aggressively tracking down Samuel Yenowine. They managed to track his movements to a low-budget motel located in North Charleston. When agents raided the motel room, they arrested Yenowine and recovered a burner phone, which is a cheap, disposable mobile device used by criminals to avoid having calls traced back to their real names. Most importantly, investigators recovered the physical manila envelope that Wilkinson had warned them about. Law enforcement officially designated this file as the hit packet. When federal agents opened the hit packet, they realized they were looking at a level of chilling, meticulous preparation that went far beyond what a typical low-level criminal could put together. The packet did not just contain a name and an address. It was an exhaustive dossier on Nancy Latham's entire existence. Inside were printed maps of her neighborhood with handwritten notes detailing the best routes to take to avoid local police patrols. It contained a complete layout of her home, her explicit daily schedule, details about her children, and the exact make, model, and license plate number of her vehicle. Most disturbing of all were multiple photographs. There were close-up pictures of Nancy herself, clear photos of her house taken from various angles, and shots of her car parked in her driveway. The depth of the information made one thing completely obvious to the FBI. Whoever ordered this hit wasn't just a stranger. It was someone who had intimate, daily access to Nancy's personal life, her schedule, and her home. The task force immediately launched a massive forensic investigation into the physical components of the hit packet. They sent the maps and handwritten notes to a specialized federal forensic laboratory for handwriting analysis. At the same time, digital forensics experts began analyzing the burner phones seized from the motel room. By looking at the incoming and outgoing call logs on the disposable phone, investigators traced the signals to local cell phone towers. They matched those times against the movements of the suspects and discovered that the burner phone had been communicating frequently with a specific individual in the Charleston area. The digital trail led them directly to a woman named Wendy Moore. When investigators dug into Wendy Moore's background, the puzzle pieces began to rapidly click into place, exposing a bizarre connection between a group of hardened ex-convicts and the upper echelon of Charleston's wealthy elite. Wendy Moore was the legal ex-wife of Samuel Yenowine, the very man sitting in a federal holding cell for organizing the hit, but her current life was connected to someone else entirely. Wendy Moore was working as an assistant at an elite banking institution, and she was currently having an intense, secret romantic affair with her boss, a highly successful multimillionaire banking executive named Christopher Latham. Christopher Latham was none other than Nancy Latham's estranged husband. The two had been married for 24 years, but their relationship had completely deteriorated into a toxic, bitter, and incredibly expensive divorce battle. Christopher was facing the prospect of losing millions of dollars in assets, property, and future earnings through the family court proceedings. Suddenly, the FBI had their motive. To prove the theory, federal agents needed to link the wealthy corporate executive and his mistress directly to the physical evidence found in the motel room. The digital forensics team executed search warrants for Christopher Latham's personal cell phone, as well as the office computers and corporate printers located inside the bank where Latham and Moore worked. The results of the digital search were devastating for the defense. When agents opened Christopher Latham's personal cell phone records, they found the exact digital file of the photograph of Nancy's house that had been printed out and placed inside the assassin's hit packet. The forensic paper trail grew even more damning when investigators analyzed the corporate network at the bank. Digital footprints showed that the detailed maps, neighborhood layouts, and scheduling documents had been compiled and printed directly from the office computers and individual desk printers assigned to Christopher Latham and Wendy Moore. The handwriting analysts at the federal lab delivered the final blow, confirming with absolute certainty that the handwritten directions and notes on the murder maps matched the handwriting of Wendy Moore. Further financial tracking showed a paper trail of cash withdrawals. Investigators established that Wendy Moore had driven her white Dodge Durango to the North Charleston motel to meet her ex-husband, Samuel Yenowine. She had personally checked into a room for the hitmen and handed over a $5,000 cash down payment, with the promise of an additional $20,000 once Nancy was dead. Christopher Latham had used his wealth and his mistress's criminal connections to outsource the execution of his wife, believing that using a chain of intermediaries would keep his hands completely clean. The case took a dramatic and sudden turn in June of 2013, just a few months after the initial arrests. While awaiting trial in a federal detention facility, Samuel Yenowine committed suicide in his cell. With the primary coordinator of the plot dead, the defense believed the prosecution's case would fall apart because Yenowine could no longer take the stand to implicate his ex-wife or Christopher Latham. However, the FBI's meticulous forensic work ensured that the trial would proceed. The prosecution bypassed the missing testimony by calling a surprise witness to the stand, a federal inmate named Tyler Lee Tudor, who had shared a cell with Yenowine before his death. Under oath in front of a packed federal courtroom, Tudor testified about conversations he had with Yenowine inside the prison. Yenowine had openly discussed the murder-for-hire plot, explaining the mechanics of how the money was being funneled and how the operation was supposed to go down. The defense fought aggressively to have this testimony thrown out, claiming it was unreliable hearsay, but the judge allowed it because the statements directly aligned with the independent digital and physical evidence the FBI had already uncovered. When the federal trial officially commenced in South Carolina in February of 2014, the courtroom drama reached an all-time high. Wendy Moore took the stand and attempted to absorb the blame, while Christopher Latham's defense attorneys argued fiercely that the wealthy banker was completely oblivious to the plot. They painted a picture of Christopher as an innocent man who was caught in the middle of a rogue operation orchestrated entirely by his overly zealous mistress and her unhinged ex-husband. They argued that Moore had acted completely on her own to eliminate Nancy, hoping that by getting rid of the wife, she could secure Christopher and his multi-million-dollar fortune all to herself without him ever knowing what she had done. The prosecution completely dismantled this defense by laying out the timeline of the digital evidence. They argued to the jury that it was logistically impossible for Christopher Latham to be blind to the conspiracy. They pointed out that the crucial photograph of Nancy's home used by the hitman had originated from Christopher's own private cell phone. They showed bank records indicating coordinated financial movements that lined up perfectly with the cash drops given to the assassins. The assistant United States attorney stated to the jury that Christopher Latham was the mastermind who held the ultimate motive, using his wealth as a weapon and utilizing Wendy Moore as a shield to do his dirty work. The jury watched as the prosecution connected the high-powered corporate banking office directly to the low-budget motel room where the hitman stayed. After days of intense testimony and the presentation of a massive mountain of forensic data, the jury went into deliberations. The legal fallout was definitive. Wendy Moore was found guilty on all counts presented against her, including conspiracy and the solicitation of a federal murder-for-hire plot. She was sentenced to 15 years in a federal penitentiary. Christopher Latham's fate rested on whether the jury believed he had actively participated in causing interstate travel for the crime. The jury ultimately found him guilty of the federal charge of using interstate commerce facilities in the commission of murder for hire. The high-flying banking executive was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison, trading his luxury lifestyle and million-dollar estate for a stark cell. Nancy Latham and her daughters finally found safety, knowing that the intricate web of deception had been completely unraveled. The case became a landmark example for local law enforcement, demonstrating how a simple, everyday traffic stop on an ordinary afternoon can ripple outward to expose a massive, corporate-funded conspiracy hidden behind the closed doors of high society.